Normally, when we hear the term meditation, there are many ideas we have, and there are many techniques, many methods that are being taught in the name of meditation. So, the direct pointer here about meditation is not to learn a new technique or to have any kind of method, because the important thing to recognize is that every method, technique is all only for the imaginary ego that is wanting to get something. As soon as we put the question how to meditate, the question is put forth by the false ego, which is interested in getting somewhere with this meditation. The question how always implies time, and through time to get something. So, in the realm of what is called transactional world, it is an important question to ask how to do anything, how to learn a musical instrument, how to learn a new skill. All of this involves time, and there is a process through which one can learn, and that is thought learning for itself. But the core illusion we have is that there is a separate me sitting within the body, within the mind, which is the center from which all actions are happening, which is controlling and experiencing the various actions and perceptions. So, whatever perceptions that are there, it is experienced from a center. And similarly, whatever actions that are done, it is done from a center, from a me. And this false sense of me, which is the ego, which is rooted in the I thought, then wants to thereby also get into meditation. And when we get into meditation, the same I thought wants to now learn a new method to get some goal. And when the goal is put in front of this me as liberation or as self realization or anything that is put forward, that is also taken by the same me as something to achieve, as something to attain. And in this process, therefore, the I, the me, engages in meditation and wants to learn something, wants to attain something. And therefore, there is controlling of thoughts, there is suppression, or there is focusing on a particular object. All of this. The important pointer, therefore, in meditation is not how to meditate, not what to do, but who is present now. This is the real question, which is the direct pointer of self inquiry, which is the direct form of meditation as well, which is who is meditating right now? Who is the presence in which all of this is happening? Normally, we take ourselves to be a separate self. This is a programming that is there both through biological perhaps, but certainly through societal reasons. We have a strong programming within each one of us, conditioning that I'm a separate self, I'm an individual self, and this individual self nature, which is the me, is driving our lives. And we see that that is what is causing all conflicts at all levels, whether it is at the individual level, family level, society level, or at international level. all of these conflicts are ultimately rooted in this sense of me. And this sense of me, therefore, being the root cause of all problems, when it is engaging in meditation, when the same me now wants to sustain itself through learning a method, to learning a technique, then we are not actually looking at the root problem, but we are only strengthening it in a different way. So, the direct pointer of meditation, therefore, is not what to do or how to do, but who is doing it. When we ask the question who, when we look for this so called me, the so called ego, we find that it does not exist. And that is the direct way of meditation. If we look at thought rising, we look at thought can come up, thought has its own energy. And when thought rises, immediately we identify as the thinker of the thought, and there is a division between thinker and thought. And then, from the standpoint of the thinker, we look into the thought. We either, normally speaking, indulge in the thought, run behind the thought, and just get lost in it. But when we come to meditation, we perhaps do the opposite, which is we now try to control the thought. We tell ourselves not to think. We tell ourselves that the mind should remain quiet and remain still. And by saying all this, we are actually again taking the possession of me. Rather than running behind the thought, now we are running or putting ourselves against the thought. But that position is again a position taken by the same false me. And as me, I am now having a fixed opinion or a fixed position that I have to remain free of thoughts. And that's where lies the conundrum, because the very fixed position taken by the me that I have to remain still is actually the same false idea of a center of an individual ego, which was earlier running behind thoughts. Therefore, the direct pointer is not to suddenly run behind thoughts, but not to also control them, not to tell oneself not to think, to tell oneself I have to remain still. None of that is helpful. Instead, if we just simply look at where is this thought rising, is there a separate me having this thought? We find that thought rises with its own energy from the ground of memory, which is knowledge, which is experience. From this ground, thought rises. Thought has its own energy with which it rises. And when we simply remain not engaged with it, but just look at it, then we see that thought is just something that rises and falls on its own. Everything has the same life cycle. It rises, it stays, and it falls. Thought also has the same life cycle. It just simply rises, it stays, and falls. And thought is a single movement. It is then devoid of any subject object division. It is just thought that rises on its own, just as a perception rises. When our eyes are open, we see something. There is perception rising, and the whole perception is one movement. The entire science behind it is well explained now. But regardless of all that, we don't think about anything. There is the seer, the seen, and the seeing. All three are form of one movement. But what we do even while seeing is we divide ourselves through thinking into the seer, and then we want to capture the scene as an experience. So we then want to either capture it through looking into the past, comparing it to what we have seen before, or projecting what we will see later. And in various ways, we pull ourselves separately from what is happening to make it into an experience for the me. This is seen in seeing, in hearing, in all the sense activities. If you look carefully, when simply seeing happens, there is no separate experiencer of the seeing. There is just seeing, there is just hearing, there is just speaking. But the moment we pull ourselves separately from that through thought, and that is the only place where we are using the sense of me to pull ourselves separately from this experience into a me. And the same thing happens in thought as well. When thought rises, thought has its own energy, it has its own place. And when thought rises for what is necessary, that can be taken care as a natural response to the thought. But when thought has no place, then it doesn't rise. But for us, because we are constantly engaged in this sense of me, even when there is no reason for thought to rise, thought rises because of our constant interest in it. So if we then tell ourselves, I ought to not think, I ought to remain still, then that very position we take gives more energy to thought. It comes back at us with more force, and it seems like we are completely slammed with a unending sequence of thoughts. The mind doesn't seem to stop chattering. All of this seems to be the way meditation goes, that it brings up so many thoughts. But if we don't take any position in meditation, that is the most important thing. In meditation, we remain simply without taking any position. If we take a position that I have to do something, that is the same false me that's coming and asserting itself. If I say that I have to abide as pure consciousness, that is again the same me that is saying this. If I say that I have to abide as the heart or abide in the heart, whatever voice comes in the head, that voice is taking us away from what is the true heart, what is the true self. Because that voice is memory that is coming based on knowledge, which is pretending to take us to the true essence while actually keeping the separation well intact. And therefore, the key to meditation is to not take any position. That is the essence of remaining still, is that we don't take any position, we don't have any direction, we don't have any goal, we don't have any sense of attaining anything. We just simply remain without engaging with anything. And when we just remain still, and when there is a pull to identify with the thought, if we simply look into whether there is a separate me, is there an I here that is separate from the thought, then we find there is no such I, there is only thought that's rising. Thought has its own energy and it rises. When we see this clearly, then thought dissolves on its own. We don't have to do anything to shut down thought, to control thought, any of that. The gentle inquiry, which can be, it doesn't have to be verbalized, we don't have to say anything. If we just look at thought very clearly and just see that thought is rising on its own, and there is no separate me in this thought, it's just memory that's rising with its own energy, then that very seeing pulls the plug, as it were, from the thought, because thought is sustained only through attention given partially as thinker. When there is complete attention, when there is no division in our attention to say, I am the thinker and here is the thought, that partial attention, which causes a fragmentation, is what sustains thought, sustains this division. When we don't have any such fragmentation, when we just look at the whole thought rising as one movement, which is an expression of the divine energy, thought rises simply out of the same power, the same energy that is making everything rise. Perceptions rise because of that, images rise because of that, actions, activities happen because of that. And the same energy that makes everything happen is what's making thought rise. So if we don't make thought into a problem, but if we just simply remain without engaging with it, but just recognizing it as a divine expression which is whole, and not divide it and identify as me having the thought. That is the core delusion, is the idea that I am having the thought. The I that says I am having the thought is itself a thought. So the thinker is the thought, and that is the most important thing to recognize, is that the I, which is imagining itself to be having the thought or now wanting to control the thought, all of this is put together by an image which is also built by memory, which is thought. So when we recognize that anything I do on the thought is simply thought acting on thought, and therefore when there is a necessity to engage in a thought when we are going about our day, that happens on its own. Even there is no division, just as seeing happens without any division when we are not caught in capturing the experience. So when we see, that's why when we go to any place, for example, even when we are in nature, or when we are going to a place traveling perhaps, there is a tendency to capture the experience. And that is why there is so much interest in taking selfies and all the rest, because there is a division that rises to say I have to capture this experience, and the I that wants to capture the experience divides itself from the holistic movement of perception that's happening. The holistic movement of perception happens with its own divine energy, but the me that rises wants to capture it for itself. And the same division is what happens when we sit in meditation and thought rises. We are conditioned to think I am this thinker of the thought, and I have to pull myself separate from the thought, and I have to then do something about it. Either I'm interested in it or I want to control it. If you recognize the same movement that happens in all of this is self inquiry. This is to recognize through this that there is no false I here. The false I is only an imagination. And because we are sustaining this imagination through believing in it, through taking it to be real, we are constantly fortifying it. And then when we are in meditation as well, we are energizing it by taking a position. And from this position, we are wanting to do something about this thought, or about wanting to be silent, about wanting to be still. So the I that wants to be still is the only problem that is remaining, or that is preventing the stillness from that is already here. So the stillness that is already here, in which thoughts come and go, is missed because of the I that wants to be still. So when we see this conundrum, this paradox, then we simply remain still. We don't have to engage with it in any way. We recognize that the very interest in taking any position with respect to the thought is thought. That's the key insight. When we recognize that, then we don't have to do anything, and there is just stillness. Thought may come and thought may go. We are not interested in it. We are not engaged in it. It has its own energy. And when there is no room for, when there is no place rather for thought, then there is no thought, there is silence. And when there is a thought, it rises, it falls on its own. And regardless of whether thought rises and falls or there is no thought, it doesn't affect the ground of stillness. But the moment we identify with it and have any goal, then the stillness is gone. So that's why the direct pointer of self inquiry is let the false I fall down. So that's why there is a small expression in even Upadesha Saram. It says, I patatyaham nija vicharanam. The I falls down. This is inquiry. then shines the true presence. We don't have to do anything about it. If we seek that true presence, that is actually again the false I seeking the true presence, which is projected as the true I. And then in this attempt to seek the real I, the false I is sustained. So the real I can never be known by the false I. The two never meet. It is like, that's why the snake and the rope metaphor is given. As long as the snake is there, the rope is not seen, and as once the rope is seen, the snake is not there. Similarly, the false I can never touch this truth, and in its constant effort to touch it, it is sustaining itself. The separation is sustained. So our only focus with meditation is to see the falsity of this false I. It doesn't exist even now. Everything happens on its own, and everything happens spontaneously. And to see that truth, that the imaginary false I doesn't exist even now, is meditation. And when we see this, then there is just silence in which thoughts may come and go. But it's not a dead silence which we are trying to force ourselves into, but it is a very alive, alert presence in which if there is a thought, it rises and falls. If there is no thought, there is no thought. If there are perceptions, there are perceptions. But there is the ground of stillness in which everything unfolds. So, this is the essence of self inquiry, which is true meditation. The question who is what matters, not how, in meditation. And when we are clear and when we look within with that clarity, then there is nobody here. There is no separate self. And that clarity is meditation. That insight and that stillness that comes out of that insight is meditation. See, that we are not meditating on emptiness. That's again another. There is no such thing as meditating on emptiness or on fullness. Uh, See, all of these are only, again, thought constructs. And then in these thought constructs, such as people then argue whether it's shunya or purna, for fullness or emptiness, all of these are just, again, ideas we have. So we don't have to do anything of that nature. Just if you remain, when a thought rises, see, if you remain silently and see what happens, maybe a thought rises, right? And when the thought rises, where is this thought rising? It's rising in our awareness. Now, is the thought that is rising, is that rising first of all out of any volition? Let's say if I'm just sitting silently and a thought rises spontaneously, the thought has its own energy with which it rises. So I did not think the thought is happening. Just as perception, every perception is happening, thought is happening. And the thought happens in our awareness. Now, if we simply remain without telling that it is my thought, it is I am thinking this thought, but I just see that there is thought, then there is just thought. And that division between the thought and the thinker as I is not there until we identify with the thought as my thought. So that is the first and most important pointer, is not to think I am thinking, but there is thought. And when we don't identify with it, but we just recognize the presence in which thought is rising, then thought cannot sustain itself and keep going. See, if we run behind the thought, of course, thought has energy. If we say I should not think, then it is different kind of energy. If I say I have to focus on emptiness, then we are putting one thought against another thought. If I just remain doing nothing, but just look at the thought that rises, if it rises, then what happens? There is nobody identified as the thinker of the thought. There is no I as the separate me which is thinking the thought. When this is seen clearly, then thought automatically subsides. We don't have to do anything. The very doing is the me. So we are so conditioned to do something that we say, I have to do something. I have to focus on this or focus on that. If we don't do anything, that's to be still. If we just remain still and be clear that it is not I thinking the thought, thought is rising. Now, who is having this thought? This thought is happening in awareness. Just remain as that. That's pure inquiry.